Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks. Shannon?
Yes, I'm Shannon.
I'm Andrew.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
All right, so I'm gonna see if I can give you the option to share your screen
Okay.
because I think that's important.
Mm-hmm.
So you should be able to do it. We'll give everybody a quick minute to get on
Sure.
and then we can get started.
Hi, Shannon, I'm here.
Hey, how are you, Miguel?
Good, how are you?
Hi.
Are we doing cameras? Do you want to turn on my camera?
Do what?
Are we doing cameras? Do you want to turn on my camera?
Sure.
No, there I am.
I'm here, but I'm not showing anybody my face because I've been painting all day and I look like doo-doo. So
That's all right.
Well, I'm here too. Can y'all hear me?
I can hear you. It's good to see you,
I
boy.
can hear you, Bud.
Good to see y'all. I'm about to turn my video off too because I'm outside grilling.
You have some for all of us?
Yeah,
I say
come on.
you on the grill. We should have joined you.
Hey, John.
How you guys doing?
All right, so I will turn it over to Andrew. He is our featured presenter tonight. Thank you guys for making time to join us, and I will turn it over to Andrew.
Okay. My name's Andrew Crook. I am an engineer with Giles Flythe Engineers out of Raleigh. Your HOA hired my company to perform a reserve study for your community to help with your current and future HOA budget. A reserve study is a long-term budget planning tool which is used to identify and prepare for major repair and replacement projects for an association. In 2021, our company performed close to 300 reserve studies. I think it was 291 last year. We have 8 licensed reserve specialists on staff and 13 professional engineers. I have both of those qualifications. This reserve study is a review of your existing HOA finances. Your regular HOA dues go into multiple savings accounts, and one of those accounts is called a reserve account. And it is used to save up for future large-scale capital repair projects. So this reserve study focuses on that reserve account. The purpose of the reserve study is to help the HOA budget for future expenses, specifically the larger expenses that will be paid out of that reserve account. For your community, the largest expenditures that are forecasted pertain to the stormwater ponds and to the pedestrian bridge over Sawmill Branch Canal. Those are the 2 biggest items that we looked at in the reserve study. We also looked at the other site improvements, including your drainage systems. There's some wood fencing at the main entrance, the asphalt walking trail that leads to that pedestrian bridge. You have an entrance sign with some irrigation systems there. So for this study, we were provided with your current HOA financial statements so that we could generate a cash flow model over the next 20 years. So repairs to the stormwater ponds, the pedestrian bridge, so on and so forth, are all included in that cash flow model. So the conclusion of the reserve study, what we found is if the association was to maintain its current dues schedule, the HOA will exhaust its reserve funds in about 2 years. So unfortunately, what that means is that your HOA dues will need to be periodically increased. As I understand, for the past several years, there has not been a regular contribution into a reserve account. So it is important to restart this contribution to make sure that the HOA is adequately prepared for your future capital repairs and improvements that you will need to address as a community. In this study, I have developed a few different funding scenarios to help pay for these upcoming projects. Those funding show various approaches to the funding increases to ensure that the HOA does not run out of money while also being able to pay for the future repairs and upgrades. I will have to defer to the board for specifics on exactly how much the dues need to be increased. But for the purpose of this presentation, the immediate increase will likely be somewhere between $90 and $125 for this year, and then additional smaller increases over the next several years. Now, there is one important note. If you adopt one of these increased due schedules that I have suggested in this study, this will help to avoid the need for a special assessment. So that's one of the big goals, is to make sure that the community is not hit with a large assessment. And unfortunately, the best way to avoid that is going to be to do some periodic increases to your dues. So I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen and bring up that reserve study. Just a moment. And I'm going to share this. Okay, so here is the reserve study. It is almost a 40-page document, but there's a little bit of boilerplate at the start, and then we have a description of the community, and then observations. This is basically a narrative of what we included in the study, and it's a lot of text. And then we talk about the reserve fund analysis, and these are the funding alternatives. But what I really want to focus on is the cash flow analysis. This is the appendix portion. Let me see if I can't make this a little bigger. So this is the current financial status of the community. 161 single family homes. You're currently sitting on about $10,000 in the reserve account. And the way that we have put together this study, it looks like over the next 20 years, you're going to have to spend approximately $500,000. So that equates to about $27,000 per year. So the goal is going to be to maintain that $27,000 per year over the next 20 years. The next page, this is expense estimates. This is what we call our component inventory. These are all the items that were included in the reserve study. So we have the wood post and rail fencing. That's the fencing along the main entrance. We have some supplies for repainting and repairs. We also have some funds for full replacement. Entrance monument repairs. That's the brick entrance sign with the Arbor Walk sign at the top of that. There's the pedestrian trail. It's an asphalt trail, and it will eventually need to be resurfaced. Here's one of the big items: is the pedestrian bridge maintenance. I did walk the top of the bridge, and I did walk underneath the bridge. It's a steel frame structure, and it is full of rust. It's not in bad structural condition, but if that rust is not attended to, then it will become a structural concern. So maintenance repairs would be to go in and sandblast, shot blast, or just scrub away the corrosion and then recoat it. And we recommend doing that approximately every 10 years. And if you were to do that, we are likely looking at a remaining service life of about 20 years. So replacing that pedestrian bridge is also included in the study, but that is a long-term replacement. That's not something you need to do in the next few years, assuming that you do address the corrosion that is occurring on the steel frame. There's also stormwater and drainage facilities. We did provide a general allocation for drainage improvements. When I walked the common areas, there were a number of sinkholes, areas of standing water that weren't freely draining away. Those are some issues that probably need to be addressed. There's also some stormwater pond repairs that are ongoing. And in the future, you are probably going to need to do some large scale repairs like dredging of the ponds. Dredging can be, the cost and need for dredging can be determined by a sediment mapping survey. It's called bathymetry. And what they do is they go out and they measure the depth of the pond in a number of locations, and they will kind of generate a map of the pond depths, and then come back a couple of years later and generate that same map, and they will be able to determine the rate of sediment accumulation. So as the pond ages, as your drainage systems continue to work, that sediment accumulation will result in a loss of volume of the pond. So it won't be able to retain as much water. and dredging will have to be performed to remove that excess sediment, restore it back to its original condition. And that's a pretty large scale expense as well. So the biggest repairs that we see are maintenance and eventual replacement of the pedestrian bridge and large scale repairs to the stormwater ponds. So this is your component inventory, the unit cost, total cost each time you do this type of repair. And then we have an estimated useful life and remaining useful life. I won't go into immense detail on exactly how to interpret that because it's laid out for you on the next couple of pages, this annual expense projection. So this is that same component inventory, but it shows your total cost by year over the next 20 years. So this first page is the first 10 years, and the next page is the next 10 years. So the dates to circle, 2024, that's when I put in funds for maintenance repairs of this pedestrian bridge. And then the next one is 2034. I'm sorry, 2032, which is when we have dredging of the stormwater ponds. And then we have some more maintenance repairs in 2034. So like I said, this is a total cost per year breakdown. And if you look at these bottom two lines, that's the total in today's dollars. And then assuming 3.5% inflation, we inflated those numbers as well. I know inflation has been a lot higher of late. We certainly hope that it will come back down to something more reasonable and kind of balance back on what has been historical inflation, which is around 3 to 3.5%. So we did use 3.5% inflation rate for this study, with the hope that it will come down from the current 7, 8, or whatever percent it currently is. So totals including inflation. If you look at let me move some windows around. If you look at the last year, 150,000 in 2041 at 3.5% inflation becomes almost $300,000. So inflation does play a pretty big part in this. Expense summary, this is similar to the first page, but what I want to draw your attention to is the current funding analysis. So this is the actual cash flow model. And this column where we have repair expenses, those are the same numbers that are on the bottom lines here. Oh, let me not do that. So for example, 7763 in the year 2023, that's this first number that we see right here in the year 2023. So this cash flow model, your starting balance, you have about $10,000. You're not currently putting in anything into the reserve account, and we don't have any repair expenses for the year 2022. So the year end balance will be $10,000. Year 2023, it's basically the same model, but we do have repair expenses. So you subtract that 7763 and you end up with $2,500. And as you can see, if you were to maintain this and adhere to the replacement schedules we recommended, we're looking at going into the red by the year 2024. So what we have proposed are a couple of different funding models where you stay out of the red, maintain a good, healthy balance in the reserve account. Alternative one, we are looking at approximately $15,000, $14,500 of reserve account contribution, and that equates to about $90 per unit on top of your current dues. And then that number increases by $20 in the year 2024, and another $20 in the year 2026, and so on and so forth. And as you can see at the graph, and then at the year-end balances, we're looking at a good, positive, healthy balance for this funding alternative. This alternative is a little softer on the front end, but requires larger increases later on. So what I tried to do was provide sort of an inverse of that, where we're looking at a slightly larger near-term increase, but it'll be a long-term savings. And the best way to look at that is in the year 2041, and alternative one, you're at $270 per year, where this one is $240 per year. So it's a $30 per year difference after 20 years. At the end of the day, these alternatives aren't substantially different. And most of the time we see boards adopt the funding model that will save them money in the near term. So I would anticipate funding alternative one would be the most appealing to you as a community. But ultimately, that is going to be your decision as a HOA board, as a community association. So these are the funding alternatives that we have recommended, and these are based on the site inspection with the various components that we looked at during the study, the condition of those components, and the cost that we anticipate those components to have for repair or replacement. That's a pretty broad and quick and dirty overview of the reserve study. I'm happy to answer any questions that any of you have.
So thank you for explaining all of that, Andrew. One question that I've gotten over and over again is about the pedestrian bridge. How do we know that that's ours, that we're responsible for that? So can you talk about that?
Yes, I answered that by email, and I can go over that here and now as well. Let me see if I can share. Is it this one? Just a moment. Is this the right one? Sorry, I had two different emails open. I want to make sure that I'm sharing the right one. Is this the email with the red text or no? Sorry.
No.
Sorry, I can't.
It was another one. I think it might be further down.
Okay.
I know you
Technically,
answered. I know you answered it via email, but I'm getting text question in the chat.
Yes, I want to make sure to address this here now. Okay. Can you see this where I have Willett Drive plat? So
Yes.
here's the plat map. Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. All right. So this is Willett Drive. This is the cul-de-sac end of Willett Drive. This is the 25-foot sewer and pedestrian access easement. This is where that asphalt trail is located. This is
Oh,
where we have 120 foot.
I just see your email.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
It's not clicked on.
Oh, it's not. Okay. Let's
open.
try. Let's try. I'm sorry. Share this. Sorry, I'm not very good at driving on these Zoom accounts here. Can you see this now? This is the map.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
I
that
see
shows
it
the
now.
plats. That's the plats.
This is the plat. Yes. All right. Let's try this one more time, and I apologize for this delay. We will share this. All right. Can we see it now?
No, it's the same one.
It's the same one. Okay. So this is the plat that I'd like to refer to. So this is Willett Drive, and we have this pedestrian access easement,
Mhm.
and this is that asphalt trail. This is the 120-foot Army Corps of Engineers drainage easement, and your property boundary is this last dotted line that's up here. No, I'm sorry. Your property boundary is this solid line with the triangles on it. So the bridge does extend over this drainage easement. So it is within the Army Corps of Engineers drainage easement, but the pedestrian access easement is still within Arbor Walk property. And there's another, let's see if I can open this. I'll have to do another screen share. I did a screenshot of the Dorchester County GIS map. And let me see if I can share this. Okay, can we see this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the property. Here's the bridge. It is partially on your property and partially off your property. So the only quote proof that we have
It's
that
the HOA's Zoom meeting.
so the only proof that we have at this time is the fact that part of the bridge is on the property as shown on the plat map and the Dorchester GIS. In order to fully determine ownership, I would recommend getting a lawyer involved, possibly the Army Corps of Engineers. And it might take recording another document with either town of Somerville or Dorchester County to fully establish ownership. But based on the information that I was provided and that I collected, it does appear that this bridge is property of Arbor Walk. If that changes and it is not property of Arbor Walk, then I can remove that from the study. But it would be prudent to keep it in the study for now, just to make sure that you are properly preparing for any major expenses associated with that. So hopefully that helped to clarify at least a little bit. But unfortunately, I'm not the, I don't have the final say on whether or not that is your property. I would have to defer to, an attorney for that. Any other questions?
No, no, thank you, but it sounds like a good idea because I don't see a need for us picking up the tab for that bridge.
I can understand that. I know it's an expensive process. The repairs are expensive, replacement is expensive, but unfortunately, if it is on your property, then the association is obligated to maintain it if it is owned by the association. So I think the next step for the board or possibly for your community manager would be to consult with an attorney. It might take getting a survey crew out. It might take consulting with the Army Corps of Engineers because it is within their access easement. But at this point, based on the information that we have, it does appear to be owned by Arbor Walk. So I would unfortunately have to defer to outside parties in order to fully establish that.
I have a question. Do we know who built the bridge? Was it Ryland or was it the county?
I don't know who built it. There is a manufacturer's nameplate on each end of the bridge, but I don't know who paid to have it installed.
Because it looks like the
Ryland
bridge
did. It was Ryland.
And the county property. So if the county built it, they simply built it on our land. That
Right.
would
If the
be-
county built it, it's likely going to be counties.
Right.
It was
Now, if
Ryland had
Ryland
it installed. It was installed by Ryland. I'll have to go look and see if I can find the permit that they had to get with the Army Corps of Engineers to install it.
Oh, so it was a Ryland. Okay.
It was Ryland. Ryland put it in.
So then that
It
means
cost
it's
them a-
ours. Okay.
Ryland installed it.
Yeah, I can. So typically what you would see in a situation like that is, while the half of the bridge is probably on county or town property, like he said, Ryland probably installed the bridge, got a permit to put the bridge, and that was considered an amenity because you had access to that trail. So I think he's absolutely right. I think that would be our responsibility to take care of. Ryland probably put it in, Ryland being the developer, and that would be an Arbor Walk responsibility.
Thank
Well,
you.
yeah, now it makes more sense.
Thanks for clarifying that, Boyd.
Yep.
So the other thing that came up is the $28,000 and kind of where that number came from. So I know Andrew explained to me that he used similar projects in like Atlanta and was it the Charlotte market?
The Raleigh market.
The Raleigh market. So
Yes.
we may be able to find a contractor who can do that for a cheaper, rate, maybe a painting company or, there aren't that many, like I did a quick search and there aren't that many like bridge repair companies in Somerville, but it may be, we can get some quotes on that and get that number down.
Yes, the number was based on the approximate size of the bridge and similar costs that I have seen. The most familiarity that I have is based in the Atlanta market. I worked in the Atlanta area for about 7 years before I moved to Raleigh in 2017. And I did a number of projects, mostly on parking garages that were, the majority of those were just standard cast in place concrete, but there were several that were conventional steel frame, very similar to how that bridge was built. And that cost per square foot, that $40 per square foot, actually is a little bit higher than what we saw in Atlanta. But in this case, there are some more difficult access provisions. We'll probably have to have some scaffolding put up or some other access means to get to the underside where there are some height limitations where the bridge goes over the actual canal. So usually between $30 and $35 per square foot for that type of steel cleaning and recoating. But I bumped it up to 40 just to make sure that those access provisions are also covered.
And then on the replacement bridge, somewhere in the summary, you said that if we maintained it, we could extend that life and kind of push off that replacement cost. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So what I included in the study, that year 19, which is effectively the final year of the term, that does assume that you are going to regularly address corrosion issues on the bridge. If you do not do this steel cleaning recoating project, then you're probably looking at another 10 to 15 years would be an educated guess, because once so right now it's just surface corrosion, but once that corrosion advances to a structurally significant state, if you want to look up the term exfoliation corrosion, exfoliation, like you can use a skin product to exfoliate your pores or something like that. Like it's the same word. How it applies to steel. The steel will actually deteriorate. It will kind of flake apart. It will lose its sectional size. It will become weaker that way, and eventually can lead to failure. I've seen some very severe corrosion in similar types of structures before, and the repair cost for those types of conditions far exceeded the replacement cost. So that's why I do recommend budgeting for complete replacement. Even if you do regularly clean off the corrosion and recoat it, you're still going to be looking at the regular need to do this type of maintenance, and it will still likely see continued corrosion related damage. So to summarize the point of Shannon's original question here, if you were to continue to maintain the bridge, we believe you'll get another 20 plus years out of it. So this $150,000 for replacing the pedestrian bridge, that shows up in the very final year of the term, that $150,000. So you might be able to push that back a few more years, but it is important for the purpose of this study that it is included. And if you'd like to push that out a little bit more, then that's probably something you would want to revisit with an eventual reserve study update once you have started a repair and maintenance cycle for that bridge.
So on that last note, I noticed that you recommended like an update every 5 years. I was thinking like maybe every 10 years. What of all the reserve studies that you've done, what is the average age when people would repeat or update a reserve study?
We recommend every 3 to 5 years. We have certain associations that like a yearly update, but those are associations that have a number of components that they are responsible for. Townhome communities, painting the exterior siding, replacing the roofs, private streets where they have to, resurface the roads. So that would certainly not apply to your situation. I would suggest every 5 years to try to keep ahead of any changes in construction costs, labor costs, inflation, so on and so forth. I think 5 years is probably a good, reasonable update schedule. If there are, if there's a large change to the economy, for the better or for the worse, after that or during that might be a good time as well, just to make sure that you are adequately putting enough money into the reserve account. But I think on average, 5 years is probably a good number.
Okay. So we have 10 minutes left. Is there anybody else who has questions?
Shannon, I
I've
have
got
a
a question.
question.
Go ahead.
This is Bob. And Boyd, you might want to answer this. We started out on his reserve study with $10,800. I'm not certain if we have transferred funds from operating the reserve back and forth over time. Can you answer that question?
That would be a better question for Sherry. Sherry, can you answer that or no?
I have only been here since 2019, but I know that nothing has been transferred from either account to the other in the time that I have been there until this year when we moved 10,000 to pay for the first initial payment for the pond rejuvenation. Prior to that, I have not seen where any money was moved from the reserve account into the operating or vice versa. It's always been, from my records, I have only seen the same amount in the reserve account.
Yeah, to my knowledge, that's the only time that we have taken funds from the reserves. Where that money initially came from, I'm not 100% certain. I would have to go back through the records on that, but we've not had to dig into that before then.
Okay.
Shannon, this is John. Is the report available to everyone in the community yet?
It was emailed to everybody on February
Okay, so-
7th in an
all right, so
email.
it's
It
in the
had a
email.
link. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Andrew, I had a question about the dredging of the ponds. I've been doing this for a long time. In your experience, is that something that has to be done quite often? I've never had to do that. And like I said, I've been in this business for about 20 years. So
Okay,
you are aware that's not a stagnant pond, correct?
right, yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
Yeah, water flows in, water flows out. Dredging, really it depends. There are a number of factors. First and foremost is how often you get a storm event. Because that will, the storm events will carry sediment into the pond and the sediment will filter out. The sediment will settle down to the bottom while the filtered water drains into the stream basins and so forth. Another factor is the type of soil. Where we live in Raleigh, our soil is red clay. And that red clay will really collect into the water because without going too much into the science behind it, you can break clay soil down to the molecular size. Whereas with sand, so you're in the coastal geology, so your soil is majority sand. Sand is just broken down rock. So it has it doesn't have an infinitely small size like clay does. So the way clay can bind itself to water, the sediment accumulation can be faster in clay areas. Whereas with sand, it does not adhere to the water, on a molecular level. The water might carry the sand, but the sand will settle out oftentimes before it even gets to the pond. So the short answer to your question is, I would think 20 to maybe 25 years for dredging your ponds. Given the age of the community, it was built in 2006. I think dredging is probably, 2030, 2032, somewhere in that time range based on the age of the community right now.
The other thing I want to point out just real quick is when we had the contractors come in and give us estimates for the pond repair, we asked each of them and each of them said that they did not need dredging right now. When this issue came up on the study, I asked Dragonfly because they were currently on the property repairing the ponds, and they also did not think that this was an immediate need.
And the only reason I asked that, I'm certainly not questioning you as the expert or anything. It's just something I've never had to deal with. And as I said, I've been doing it for a while and I've got some fairly older communities. So I didn't know if that was something that maybe was not quite as prevalent in this area, which it sounds like by your explanation, it's not. but
I
maybe
think that's the
something that,
case.
yeah, okay.
Are there any other questions? Nobody?
I'm all good over here, Shannon.
Okay. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to go through this with us and help us to understand it a little better. It's a lot of charts and numbers. It's a little intimidating. It sounds like a lot of money that we need to come up with pretty quick. So I appreciate you kind of going through, and the whole purpose of this study was to identify what the needs were, because the ponds issue kind of caught us off guard. We weren't prepared, and it was a big shock to everybody. So we wanted to make sure that going forward, this doesn't happen again. So I thank you for taking the time to do this and identifying all of these things that we're responsible for and putting together a plan.
Sure. I hope it helps out, and I wish you all the best of luck moving forward.
Awesome.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you
Thanks.
for all of your hard work, Andrew. Very much
sure. Happy
appreciated.
to do it.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Yep.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.